Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by MacPaw and SaneBox. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing really well. We got a pretty cool show today. Why don't we start introducing it and get to our special guest for the show today?
So with us today is Brian Mueller. He's the creator of the Carrot series of apps. And you might have seen Carrot in multiple occasions on Mac Stories in the past. It's this collection of apps featuring an evil, snarky, sarcastic, malevolent, however you want to call it, superintelligence that lives inside all of these different iPhone apps and that is so unique and so different from anything else on the App Store. It's really this sadistic and evil AI that either pushes you to complete your tasks in a task manager or tells you the weather in a very apocalyptic way, or that even it's now also in a game that we recently reviewed on Mac Stories. And it sounds crazy, this idea of having this evil character telling you to do things and telling you that the world is ending, but it actually makes sense thanks to Brian's excellent writing and excellent jokes. It's super funny, and it's so different from anything else on the App Store. When the first Carrot app came out, it was a to-do list, and it gave Brian a lot of attention and a lot of downloads because it was so different from anything else, from any task manager on the iPhone. Since then, so we're talking here 4 years ago, Brian has expanded the Carrot universe to Carrot Weather, Alarm, Carrot Fit, and now Artificial Superintelligence, which is a game based on the Carrot personality and the sort of the Carrot storyline. These Carrot apps have proven very popular with Apple. They've caught their attention, and there have been numerous features on the front page of the App Store and even some Editor's Choice Awards from Apple.
That's right, exactly, Federico. And on top of that, last summer, Apple did a profile of Carrot Weather, which it included in a special developer site that is all about how to build an iOS business. It's a really interesting video, and we'll have a link to the show notes that people should watch when they have a chance, because it goes into a lot of detail as to exactly how the watch complication for Carrot Weather was conceived. Less than 2 weeks ago, though, Brian took the Carrot series of apps in a totally new direction and released ASI, which is his first iOS game featuring the Carrot supercomputer. Here's the thing about Brian Mueller and the Carrot apps. Brian does this all alone, which is really kind of amazing. He's a one-person shop. And when Federico and I saw that he had released an iOS game, we knew immediately that we wanted to talk to Brian about his unique corner of the App Store that he's carved out for himself with these Carrot apps. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Brian Mueller to the show. Welcome to App Stories, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Brian, your background isn't in computer science. How did you get started with building apps?
Originally, I was going to go to school for screenwriting out in California. I'd gotten accepted to the MFA program at the American Film Institute. And about a month before I was about to move out there, I met who would later become my wife and made the stupid decision to stay in Philadelphia and get a quote-unquote real job doing medical research writing. And while I was doing that, I had just become really interested in iPhone apps and really wanted to find some way to make an iPhone app. And I just grabbed a book on iPhone programming, thinking I'd flip through it and learn sort of like the basic vocab, so I wouldn't sound like a total idiot when I went to talk to a programmer to help me go and build this. And when I was flipping through it, it just wasn't anywhere near as over my head as I thought it was going to be. So I just sort of started doing the tutorials. And after I went through the book, I just started Googling like how to do the different parts of building the first app, the to-do list, like how to make a list and how to put it in a table view and how to save the data and all that kind of stuff. And it ended up being not anywhere near as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I mean, it's definitely difficult, but as I've gone, I've just been teaching myself with each of the new apps different things, how to do different things, like how to talk to web servers or how to work with iCloud, that kind of stuff. And it's been a really cool experience. Definitely never something I thought that I would be able to do all by myself.
Thanks to MacPaw, maker of SetApp, for sponsoring App Stories. More and more, Mac apps are moving to subscription models. But subscription fatigue is real. Customers don't want to pay for or manage lots of subscriptions. SetApp by MacPaw, the maker of Clean My Mac, Gemini, and other apps, offers over 70 excellent Mac apps for just $9.99 per month. What's great about SetApp is you don't have to sift through a lot of junk to find the gems. SetApp is curated, so you know that the apps are high quality and from reputable developers across a broad range of categories. When you install SetApp on your Mac, it shows up as a folder that acts like a catalog of apps. You can click on apps to learn more about each and install only the ones you want. SetApp's catalog is deep. It includes everything from lifestyle and productivity apps to developer tools. There's something for everyone in SetApp, including many Mac Stories favorites like Ulysses, Screens, Task Paper, Code Runner, Clean My Mac, iStat Menus, and Marked, to name just a few of the dozens of apps available. Another nice feature of SetApp is its simplicity. There are no hidden costs. You pay just $9.99 per month. There are no paid upgrades, in-app purchases, or other charges. Every app is fully functional and updates automatically at no additional cost. In addition, SetApp continues to add new apps to its catalog all the time. You can try SetApp for free for 1 month and earn up to 6 more months free by referring friends. Visit setapp.com. That's SETAPP.com to learn more and sign up for a free month. Thanks again to MacPaw, the maker of SetApp, for sponsoring this episode.
Brian, how did the idea of Carrot come about, and why did you go with this sort of sadistic, malevolent superintelligence instead of, like, I don't know, an assistant or a cute pet, maybe a dog, a talking cat, whatever? Why this evil intelligence inside of your apps?
It's funny you mentioned a talking dog. The original version of the to-do list app was originally going to be it was called Grailer, and that's where the name of my company comes from. It was going to be a to-do list that was focused around completing your holy grail, like the one thing that you really wanted to accomplish in life. And all the different items on the to-do list would be getting you towards completing that holy grail. And it was going to have this sort of like Indiana Jones kind of theme to it, where there'd be this main adventurer archaeologist kind of guy as your guide. And he had this pet that he named Sir Waffles, who was a corgi. And he had like a top hat and a monocle, and he had this like sarcastic tone to him. And it was a lot like Carrot would eventually be. And when I started actually developing the app, I realized that it would be way too hard to like animate a cartoon corgi as the main character in the app. So I sort of dropped that whole thing and thought, what would be really easy to animate? And I just happened to be looking at a tutorial for doing core animation and expanding and contracting circles. And I thought it would be kind of easy and also look kind of cool to have these like concentric circles just pulsing in and out. And the idea of switching to this AI character sort of came from that, because it sort of looked a little like Hal's Eye from 2001.
So besides the business aspect, right, of running your own business and gotta develop the app, you also need to write these very unique and snarky dialogues. You gotta come up with the jokes. You gotta add the Easter eggs, and there are so many different details in the Carrot apps that I love, especially in Carrot Weather. When you change the location, you usually get different jokes. I mean, I love the style, and I love the sarcasm and the fact that it's so evil that it doesn't care that a human is using the app, and I just love it. But how do you balance this duality of running a serious business and being so creative and writing the dialogues? How do you find the time, and maybe how do you switch modes between these two different aspects?
That's a good question. I think that is what helps actually keep me sane and able to do all of this stuff all by myself, doing the marketing and the coding and the design and the writing, is that I can, when I get tired or sick or overwhelmed with doing one particular thing, I can sort of switch modes and switch to something completely different. So like the game that I just did, Artificial Superintelligence, had so much freaking writing. It was ridiculous that I would just spend like an hour on my bike upstairs, my stationary bike upstairs, just writing on my iPad. And when I was done with that, I could switch to doing something completely different. And I think that that's really the only thing that enables me to do this all by myself, is that I don't have to keep doing the same thing all day long. And I think that's also part of why I like doing all the different apps, is I don't have to stick so much to like doing a fitness app and only being concerned about fitness related stuff. I like being able to change things up and switch to doing like a game or a weather app. That definitely helps as well.
So would you say that writing the dialogue is basically your revenge against users, against humans? Well, because you have to do too much development or too much accounting, then you take it out on the people with the carrot dialogues.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun writing the snarky dialogue. I like to say that Carrot is based on a combination of my mother, my sister, and my wife. And it's really true, because like a lot of the dialogue from there, from Carrot, is stuff that they have actually said to me in the past. We're definitely a very like sarcastic family and constantly making fun of each other.
And where does the Apple voice technology fit into this? Because I think you're using the native APIs for speech recognition or something like that. And does this stuff help the creation of Carrot and all the other apps that you did? Are you using native APIs to sort of mimic the iPhone voice?
Yeah, I am using Apple's native speech synthesizer technology to do Carrot's voice. And it's funny, the very first version of Carrot, the to-do list, launched in the beginning of 2013. And I think the speech synthesizer APIs didn't get added until the end of that year. So the very first version had no voice whatsoever. It was just all text. And then Carrot Alarm launched later that year, but before that new iOS version came out. And I really wanted to add a voice. And I used some kind of speech synthesizer technology that that was in a web app, and you could download the voice files once you put in text. And so I included a bunch of sound files in Carrot Alarm when that launched. And a lot of people really responded to the voice and really liked it actually talking to them. And when Apple added the speech synthesizer to iOS, that really opened it up a lot more, because instead of having these static speech files that I had to play each individual one, and I was really limited by that because I could only have a handful of them. And what the speech synthesizer technology allowed me to do was have Carrot speak every line of dialogue that I could possibly write. So I wasn't limited by the space that the app could take up and the amount of time it took me to download the files and edit the files and put them in the app and sync everything up with the audio playback technology in iOS. So that really made the character come alive much more than it already was when it was just text-based or these static files that I had to put in the app.
Thanks to SaneBox for sponsoring App Stories. SaneBox sorts through your inbox, leaving only the important messages. The rest are automatically sent to a variety of places. The Sane Later folder for dealing with when you have time, Sane Bulk for mass mailings, and the Sane Black Hole for junk. It's the only thing that's worked to help me retake control of my inbox. Visit sanebox.com/appstories today for an extra $25 credit on top of the 2-week free trial you get when you sign up for SaneBox. You don't have to enter your credit card information unless you decide to buy, so there's really nothing to lose. Check it out today. Again, that's sanebox.com/appstories. Thanks again to SaneBox for sponsoring App Stories. So, Brian, how did you wind up in an Apple Developer Insights feature in video?
I think Apple at the time was really interested in what they were calling premium apps, which were paid upfront apps that also had in-app purchases or subscriptions included in them. And I think that that's what they really wanted to feature, as well as a developer that had really jumped on board with the Apple Watch and had some measure of success with it. And so I think that that's why they ended up contacting me for that.
So when you were making Carrot Weather, you reached a point where you realized you needed to add subscriptions, and I think this was related to making the Apple Watch version with a complication that updates the weather data multiple times per hour. Do you see a future where Carrot, where maybe even in a game, I don't know whether you're gonna do more subscriptions, more in-app purchases maybe? Do you think this is the road where you want to go down in the future?
Yeah, well, you guys talked about it last week. The subscriptions in Carrot Weather came about because of the Apple Watch complication, which updates constantly throughout the day. And with the API costs from my weather data provider, I wouldn't be able to, the cost of updating constantly throughout the day would, after a year, end up costing me more than customers are paying me for the app. So the subscription was really a necessity, was born out of necessity. I had to charge that amount in order to continue to make a living and provide the complication. And so the subscription so far has been really successful, and it's, even though it's only available to Apple Watch customers right now. And I'm thinking right now about expanding the subscription to the full iPhone app to all users on the iPhone and adding more features, sort of like you guys were also talking about last week, about how a lot of the subscriptions are unlock new features to the app, like iCloud syncing and that kind of stuff. And I'm definitely exploring that with the full iPhone app.
So, Brian, most of your apps are iOS apps, but you've got Carrot Weather on macOS as well. I was wondering, what are the pros and cons of developing for macOS?
Well, I'd say that it's a decent amount of work jumping from iOS to the Mac. They use the same language, obviously, for programming, and a lot of the APIs are sort of similar, but then they're also slightly different. So it's a lot of trial and error and like looking stuff up to see what the differences are and how to make things work just the way that they do on iOS. And that was a lot of trial and error and figuring stuff out. But once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. In terms of pros, it's really great to have professional apps on the Mac App Store that can do a lot more and show a lot more content than an iOS app can.
So when did you realize that a game would be the natural evolution for the Carrot personality and the Carrot story? Because you got a to-do list, you got a weather app, you got the fitness app, and then a game. How did that happen, that transition?
Well, the Carrot apps from the very beginning have had a lot of game elements to them. The to-do list had a lot of gamification elements like levels and unlockable rewards and points that you would earn for completing tasks. And I've sort of evolved that and added new things like in Carrot Weather, you can unlock secret locations just by using the app or figuring out which cities to check into that would unlock secret locations. And I'd always wanted to build a game, and it sort of seemed like the perfect opportunity after Carrot Weather was a lot more successful than the previous apps had been. It sort of gave me this headroom to experiment and do something completely new and different instead of just going on and building more similar apps. I don't know, like a calendar app or something like that. And so I'd always wanted to do a game, and because Carrot is like this AI construct, I'd always done like a little reading and been interested in artificial intelligence. But there were a couple articles that I read a couple years ago, right when I started thinking about doing this game, that were really interesting to me and sort of explained AI in a completely different light and made it make sense to me how artificial intelligence will go in the future and how stuff like Terminator and GLaDOS from Portal and HAL from 2001 aren't exactly realistic. And because computers aren't going to become evil and take over the world, it's more like it's going to be a software bug or something along those lines that would end up causing the end of humanity. It wouldn't be a computer like deciding to kill people just because it's an evil robot. And I just sort of want to explore that and teach people more about AI and why it's so cool. Because you never see, like, it's always in fiction, you have the evil robot and it's already evil. You never see the progression from a like dumb as rocks AI that can barely manage basic arithmetic to learning how to see and speak and play games, and seeing that whole progression to an actual artificial superintelligence, which is significantly smarter than a human would be.
Brian, I know from talking to you before you released ASI that you went through a lot of different ideas in terms of the gameplay and mechanics of the game. Could you describe some of those and tell us a little bit about how you decided on the format that you ended up choosing?
Yeah, well, originally it was going to be this like 1 month long project, because when I do the Carrot apps, I try to make them as simple as possible and get them done really quickly. Like the to-do list, the original version of that I built in a month. Carrot Weather, the original version of that, I built from the very beginning to when it was released on the App Store. It took 1 month. And so I try to set these really short goals. And then if the app is successful, I build on that and add a bunch of new features. So the original version of the game was going to be this clicker game where you just tap the screen to program the AI and make it smarter. And that just wasn't feeling fun to me. And so I dropped that and switched to sort of like a text adventure that I quickly realized was going to take way too long for me to write. And so I dropped that after a little while. And then I switched to an action game where you have all these different programmers and you can assign them different roles like quality assurance and cybersecurity and stuff like that. And it's sort of like this fast-paced, roles-based action game. And that wasn't working either for the story that I wanted to tell, which was that there's so many different ways for AI to go in terms of whether it can be good for humanity, whether it can be bad for humanity, and all the ways that you can go from a regular narrow artificial intelligence that's only good at completing one task to a broader human level intelligence that can complete any task that any human could just as well as a human. And there's so many ways that you can get to that point as well. So I wanted to tell a story that you could get from beginning to end within 5 minutes and see the result, and then go back to the beginning and play it all over again and make different decisions and see what would result from that. And the problem with the action game, it was actually pretty fun and I really liked it. But the problem with that was it was taking a really long time just to explain a couple basic concepts. It would have taken an hour for one playthrough. And so that just wasn't working with the style of game that I wanted to do. And so I sort of switched to the eventual style that I ended up with, where you have individual characters just talking to you, and you have two possible responses that you can make, and that ended up working much better, and it was able to fit in with the style of game and story that I wanted to do, where it's these quick playthroughs and you can make these decisions, see how they play out, and then go back and start over again and see what else you could end up doing.
So what was unique about developing a game for iOS compared to the previous utilities that you did on iOS and on macOS? Even if they had some gamification component, how was making the actual game different for you?
It was a lot harder.
Can imagine.
And a lot more work. I think I was a little bit naive in terms of how much work it was really going to be. And if I had it to do all over again, I might not have done it. And because I went through so many different iterations of the game, that only ended up making it take so much longer. And there were definitely times where I wanted to quit and just crawl back to doing the weather app and dropping this whole crazy game idea completely. In terms of actually making the game, it was a lot different because there was so much graphics in the game, so many different objects moving around and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with the other apps, it's a much more clean and simple style. Like in Carrot Weather, there's only like a couple different objects on the screen at once and only one character at a time to keep track of. So it was a lot more to keep track of and a lot more to design and draw and implement. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And then just the amount of dialogue is just so much more than I've ever done. And none of the other apps have had this like ongoing story, branching story that I had to manage. It was basically just individual lines of snarky dialogue. So I sort of had to tie everything together and have like this progression describing how the AI is going from a stupid AI all the way up to the superintelligence that she eventually become. And so that was probably the most challenging thing.
Brian, one thing is that iOS development has changed an awful lot. I mean, we haven't had the App Store for all that long when you look back, but at the same time, it's evolved at an incredible pace. What have been some of the biggest changes you've seen since you started?
Well, I think that the switch to freemium is probably the biggest business side change that I've seen since I started. I started right around when freemium games were really taking off. And from a business perspective, I think that that's probably the biggest change, and one that I haven't really tackled yet in terms of making a free app. Carrot Hunger, the calorie counter, is free with some in-app purchases, but I didn't have that much success with that one compared to all the other apps. And I know why that is and what I did wrong with it, but I haven't gone back yet and tried to do another freemium app. In terms of the actual technology, a lot has changed. There's just so much more that you have to do today to have a AAA quality app. Apps have to have widgets. They have to have Apple Watch apps. They have to have now potentially iMessage and Apple TV apps included in the same bundle. There's just so much more that you have to do now to have that AAA quality feel to your app as compared to what it was like when I first started in 2013, when apps were just lived in their own container, and they didn't have all these different elements that you could add that you could access from different parts of iOS and Apple TV and Apple Watch.
Thanks a lot, Brian. We've really appreciated you taking the time to talk to us a little bit about the Carrot apps. Where can people find you online?
They can visit meetcarrot.com is Carrot's website that has links to all of the different apps that have been released so far. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Brian Mueller 333.
Great. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that's it for this week, folks. Thanks again to our sponsors, MacPaw and SaneBox. And thank you to Brian Mueller for joining us on the show. If you've been enjoying the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating. You can find both of us writing on MacStories.net and for Club Mac Stories. You can follow the show at AppStoriesNet, or Federico, who is at Viticci on Twitter. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.